Well, it's great to be here, and thank you for joining us. I want to talk to you today about a topic that is really a new competency that we're finding emerging, and what I want to talk about is training experience that we've had around applying this new competency and some learning that we've had. We recently had a few forums this year with our customers, and we heard some interesting comments. One of the comments was, our executive and managers don't have time for development. I'll bet none of you have heard that, right? And what's interesting is they say, I don't have time, but their next breath is, well, I really want some development. I mean, I want some development, but I don't have time for development. We've also heard things like, could we create a learning where it doesn't appear as learning? It's sort of like stealth learning. It's like we're going to put a microphone or a tape recorder under your pillow and you'll absorb this information. And then we were at AT&T and we actually heard this comment, which I thought was great. I'd like a dramatic learning experience that is no longer than 90 minutes, can be viewed in person or online when people are available, and it needs to create meaningful, positive change. Now, we thought, could we do that? Could we create that kind of an experience? Could we do that? And oh, by the way, we need to do it for 2,000 managers in 30 days. Okay? So that was our challenge. And as we started to approach the challenge, one of the things that we've learned in the years that Jack and I have been doing this is that there's few things that really make a difference in any learning and development experience. One of the things that we are really clear about is that leaders need evidence. They need proof. They need to understand there is a connection between them investing time in this activity and some results. It will pay off. The second thing they need is we see great benefit from a self-assessment, some kind of an assessment. Our 360 assessments ground people. They tell people where they are. They give them their GPS coordinates. You know, 360 assessments tend to create a lot of overhead. There's a lot of difficulty in doing 360 assessments. So in the last few years, we've tried to create some self-assessments that help people realize their current state of things. And so we think assessment's important. We also continue to believe that nonlinear development is the best insight that Jack and I have had. It's the number one thing that can help people develop. Our nonlinear technology really is a solution to helping people develop new skills. And we've collected more evidence about that. We know it works. We know that follow-up is critical, and Jack has hit that topic this morning. Finally, what is interesting is that every one of our clients are in desperate need of more talent. This reminds me a little bit about the U.S. 10 years ago when we were in desperate need in the U.S. of more oil. We were an oil-poor country. I mean, we just didn't have enough oil. But technology came along and created new ways to extract the oil that we actually had. And so we've gone from an oil-poor country to we have a glut. We have too much oil. I believe that every organization has talent, enormous reservoirs of talent, but it's not being developed. And what I find is problematic is that most people are doing nothing around their development. And I have a simple logic that doing something is better than doing nothing. So could we create a learning experience for people in a very short amount of time that helped them to do some development, to focus on a specific issue that would help the organization move forward? Well, the topic we chose to work on here was something we called leadership speed. What we found is that as we did analysis on high-performing leaders in organizations and what qualities differentiated those highest, the best performers, we kept finding 3 items from our 360 that clustered together. And those 3 items had words in them like quick, efficient, early. And what we found is that they clustered into a competency we called leadership speed. Now, I remember when I was in the 5th grade, and my teacher came up to us in the 5th grade, and she said, in the future, things are going to be different. But she had read some research and a paper by a fellow by the name of John Maynard Keynes. And in 1930, he wrote this paper that said that in the future, people would work about 15 hours a week. Actually, he predicted that his grandchildren would work 15 hours a week. He didn't have any grandchildren, but his sister did. They've interviewed his grandchildren and checked out, and guess what? None of them worked 15 hours a week. His prediction of reduction in work time came from looking at mechanization and the efficiency it created, and he speculated that as we became more efficient, the need for your time and labor would reduce. Guess what happened? As we become more efficient, we actually ask people to do more. Instead of working 15 hours a week, we found that the average work time for people has gone up, and that people are busier than ever, and they're doing more than ever. One of our clients last year had 6,000 employees, and the revenue was $6 billion. Do you like the math there? $1 million of revenue per employee. Now, what's interesting is I talk to the people there, they're all saying to me, we're overwhelmed, we have huge jobs, we have too much to do. This company is small by choice. They don't want to become big and bloated and overwhelmed, so they're small by choice. Everybody has huge jobs there, and they're designed that way. I think that's the future. I think that's what the future looks like. So, as we ask people about this whole issue of speed, here's some questions we asked people and how they responded. I feel that I'm expected to move faster and do more. 83% of our respondents, this is about 5,000 people, agree. I'm often frustrated that our organization moves too slow and gets stalled. 61% agree. And if this organization were to move faster, it would substantially influence our success. 70% agree. So what we're finding is that the speed an organization moves at is a competitive advantage. This organizational agility, this ability to move quickly, to adapt quickly, is a substantial advantage for any organization. And as we sat down with AT&T, they said, we need to move faster in our technology organization, but how can the organization move faster if the leaders don't? If the leaders are slow, the organization's going to move slow. Nothing's going to change until our leaders speed up. And Stephen Kern, who's an historian and has studied this whole issue of speed through the ages, he came out with this wonderful insight. Human beings have never opted for slower. Isn't that true? Have you noticed that, remember 5 years ago when you used to boot up your PC and it kind of went through that cycle. Have any of you had the opportunity to bring out that old PC and boot it up again? And sat there in agony and pain and just kind of going, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I sat there for 3 minutes. And you realize it's not an enormous amount of time, but you realize that as we've gotten our new tools and devices that automatically boot up, we realize that, gosh, we have just taken that for granted. Now, what's the impact of speed? Well, let's talk about the definition of what speed is. Most people believe speed is the ability to move quickly. And that makes a lot of sense to me, but there might be a problem with it. Does just moving faster make a person more effective? We did one of those fun analyses where we did these comparisons between people that do things fast or people that do things right. And again, we looked at those who were at the 75th percentile on doing things fast, but below that on doing things right. And we looked at the best leaders, and we said, gee, what's the impact of doing things fast? How much, what percentage, or what's the probability if you were one of the best leaders of being a great leader? It was 2%. So it didn't look like speed had much positive impact there. And then we looked at people who were really good at doing things right. Is this number going to be higher or lower? What do you think? Higher? How much? A lot. You know, I'm just trying to suck you in. Well, it's 3%. So that's interesting when you think about that. Doing things fast, doing things right, you know, collectively it should give us about 5%. But when we looked at leaders who were really good at doing things fast and really good at doing things right, the combined effect of that, is ready for this? Drums, please. All right. 96%. Our definition of speed is doing things fast and right. Okay? I went to a physical on Monday with my heart physician. You know, as you're sitting in the waiting room, you're thinking a lot about doing things fast, aren't you? Because you're waiting, right? But as you're sitting on the operating table, what are you more concerned about? Fast or right? You know, but it's interesting because if it's open heart surgery, I mean, the longer you're open, the higher the risk. So, I mean, as you think about this whole issue of speed, it is the ability to do both, to move quickly, but also do things right. So that's our definition of speed. So what's the effect? What's the effect on you, the team, and the organization? Here's what we found. We looked at people that were below the 75th percentile on this speed competency, which is a kind of a combination of items in our existing 360. And they were at the 40th percentile in their overall leadership effectiveness. We looked at people who were above the 75th percentile, and on average, their leadership effectiveness was at the 83rd percentile. That is impressive. People who have a high level of leadership speed, they're fast and right, are twice as effective as leaders. That is amazing, isn't it? We then did another study where we looked at performance appraisals. And we looked at the probability of you getting a rating of far exceeds expectations. We found that if you were in the bottom 10% on leadership speed, only 13% of people got a far exceeds expectations. But if you were in the top 10%, 74% of people got a far exceeds expectations. So our conclusion is there's some tremendous value to you personally to increasing your speed, doing things fast and right. What about the impact on the team? What would it be like to work for a manager who moved quickly? I mean, would it drive you crazy or would you love it? Well, as we looked at leadership effectiveness or speed effectiveness, and we looked at employee engagement, we found that on average, if a leader had a speed rating of 76 to the 95th percentile, the engagement was at the 64th percentile. But if you went to the 96th percentile, it went to the 73rd, 97th, 74th, 98th, 75th. What we found is the faster the leader was, the more engaged the employees were. You know what employees love? They love when stuff gets done. You know what they hate? When stuff doesn't get done. They hate stalled. They love quick. And so what we found is leadership speed drove engagement up. There was no downside. We couldn't find it ever people moving too fast had a negative effect on engagement. The last thing we looked at the organization, and we looked at productivity, the percentage of highly committed employees. Again, you see the leadership speed ratings, and you see that as the speed goes up, the productivity goes up. So, the key takeaway here is there's a positive impact on your effectiveness and performance, on increased engagement, and the organizational speed is a key strategic differentiator. Well, how can you improve your speed? Now, one of the intuitive ideas that you have when you think about increasing your speed is just to be quicker, to move faster. The problem is that usually causes people to be more frantic, and oftentimes we see people that are frantic not having that combination of fast and right. In fact, they usually violate that. So what we looked at was, again, our analysis looking at leaders who had high leadership speed and what they did. And what we found were there were 8 behaviors, companion behaviors, that helped leaders to move quickly and do things right. Now, we think this is the secret. We think this is the secret sauce to leadership speed, these 8 companion behaviors. I just want to talk about them really quickly. Let's go through them, because in the training what we did is we introduced the companion behaviors and then asked people to select 2 that fit them the best. So if you're interested in increasing your speed, for you personally today, think about these and do they fit you? The first one is developing a strategic perspective. I remember when I was 12 years old, my uncle, who I worked for, took me out in the truck to a field that was a few miles from where his home was at. At the end of the field was a Caterpillar tractor. And I'm 12 years old, and he looked over at me and said, "You're going to plow." Now, I had never driven a car or a Caterpillar tractor, but my uncle taught me. He got on the tractor and he taught me how to start it and how to make it go forward and how to work the plows. And as we went around once, he taught me everything I needed to know. And after one time around the field, he then sat me in the seat and he said, "Now, Joe, it's your turn. You plow, and be sure to keep the track about 2 inches from the furrow." And so I leaned over the side, and as I drove up that first time, I was correcting right, a little bit right, a little bit left, a little bit right, a little bit left, but I tried to keep it right there. And as we got to the end of the row, he said, "Now, that's good. Now look back at what you did." And I looked back and I saw some of the beautiful S's. And it's really a problem if you don't plow straight. So I turned the Caterpillar tractor around, and he says, "Let me tell you how to plow straight." I said, "Okay." And he says, "Look down at the end of the field." And I looked down. He says, "Do you see the fence post?" "Yeah, I see the fence post." "Aim for the fence post. Don't look down. Aim for the fence post. When you aim at the fence post, you can plow straight. In organizations, when people are clear about where they're headed, about what the vision is, about the direction, they don't waste time going to the right and going to the left. They are more efficient and they get things done faster. The number one competency here at Increasing Speed is clear strategy and direction. The number two, to be courageous. A few years ago, I went to a presentation. A senior leader got up and he said, "I was thinking this morning, have I ever fired somebody too soon?" And he had fired a lot of people. He was in a part of the business that was in a downturn. And he says, "I've fired hundreds of people, and I can't think about one person I've ever fired that I fired too soon." He said, "In every case, I've waited too long. It would have benefited the person to get the word sooner. It would have benefited the organization to get the word sooner." You know, the number of decisions we make where we know what that decision is, but we put it off. Then we know what the right thing to do, but we put it off. When we put it off, when we don't have the courage to make that decision, we slow the organization down. Another thing that's critical is communicating powerfully. I remember when I first got my new iPhone and Siri was on it, I learned that I could send a text message to my wife by saying "tell." So I decided to test it. I got my iPhone and I said, "Tell Laura I love her." Well, Siri came up and it asked a really good question. Which Laura? It listed 5 and I'm like, whoa. That's a really good question, Siri. So I said Laura Folkman and it said message sent. Here's the message my wife received. I love her. Here's the message I got in return. You love who? You all know, and I know, that sometimes our communications don't speed things up because they're confusing. When we communicate well, when we keep people informed, it increases our speed. Another way to increase speed is by maintaining technical and professional expertise. We know that when executives have that knowledge of the organization and knowledge of how it functions, they can be more effective. And if you have to create the knowledge, or if you don't understand the knowledge, it always slows you down. The insight for leaders is you don't need to have all the answers. Your team can have the answers. What you need to do is bring those answers together. Another way of increasing speed is external focus. As you've come here to Utah, isn't it wonderful, these lovely canyons that flow down from the mountains? We have a canyon by my house. One of the funnest things I do is to ride my bike up the canyon. And it's a little bit of a steep ride, and as I'm pedaling up the canyon, I have the impression that I am moving at close to the speed of light. I mean, I just really think I'm moving fast to the point when someone passes me. Have you ever noticed that? Our perspective when we just are consumed by what's going on around us is that we're doing pretty good. But it's only when we get that external perspective that we realize others are moving twice as fast, others are doing it better. Too often in organizations, we're internally focused and not externally focused. Taking initiative is critical for speed. A few years ago, my wife came up to me and she said, "The roof on our second garage is leaking." And I looked at her and I said, "Well, it kind of washes the car. I mean, it's pretty good, you know." The number of things that sit on your desk undone, unstarted, because you don't take the initiative, slows down an organization. Now, clearly, you need to prioritize. But taking the initiative, people that grab that issue and move it forward right then make a big difference in speed. Another way to increase speed is stretch goals. I love Saturdays. On Saturday morning, I get up, I get on my work clothes, and I putter. I move from this to that. And I get a lot done, but not that much. Sometimes on Saturday, I have something to do at the end of the day. And so I have some stretch goals that I set for myself. Do you notice the difference when you have to get stuff done, when you set those stretch goals? Leaders who set stretch goals increase the speed of their organization. The last thing is fostering innovation. I remember several years ago, I was talking at lunch with one of my colleagues, Nigel, and we were talking about how much we hated voicemail, right? And the voicemail system that we had, Nigel said, I hate it because when you listen to a message, if you miss that, you ever notice when people give a phone number, they tend to mumble and speak very quickly? My numbers, they don't want 3, so and you miss the phone number, and Nigel says, I hate it because in order to get the phone number, I have to listen to the whole message again. I looked at Nigel and I said, Nigel, if you hit the 6 button, it backs up 5 seconds. And Nigel said, really? I've spent 3 years listening to every message 2 or 3 times to get the phone number. Well, it's easy to make fun of Nigel, but how many of you use applications that you use every day and you don't know how to do half of the functions, right? Where you could increase, where you have somebody walk into your office and show you how to do something and they can do it twice as well. If we use the innovations that are available to us, we can significantly increase our speed. Well, those are the keys to increasing speed. And what we wanted to do was create a very easy way for people to select one of those or 2 of those companion behaviors. Well, as you know, we use CPO a lot, competence, passion, and organization needs. What we found was an easy way for people to go through and figure out what the organization need was these questions that give them a situation, and they ask them to select the various competence or the companion behaviors that fit. What we found is using an automated PDF form, people could go through and make those clicks and it would add them up for them. We also discovered that we could self-assess a person's pace and quality. So we developed a self-assessment called the PACE assessment. The PACE assessment is a good measure of your internal clock speed, how quickly you like to move. And it asks a series of questions to do that. The results come out and they show you your emphasis on quality versus quantity, on low patience versus high patience, and on a slow pace versus a fast pace. This gives people a sense of their preference for moving quickly or doing things right. Now, we found that, like the physician, doing things right is very important, but speed is also important. And so what we did was when we had people look at those results, we found that some people had a faster pace. And this doesn't necessarily mean their leadership speed is high, but their pace is high, right? And but it suggests a preference for executing fast. Other people had a slower pace, but a more of an emphasis on quality. They can't make a mistake, and so their preference was for doing things right. What we discovered was that half of the companion behaviors are a little bit more focused on speed, and the other half are more focused on doing things right. This provided a very easy algorithm for people to go through and choose some of the companion behaviors based on their preferences. And basically, we used that process to help them. We then gave them a development guide with developmental suggestions, and they created a plan. We did this in a 90-minute session. The session was in person, online, and also recorded so people could look at it after the session. So we continue with our traditional approach to training. We think that our day or longer training programs are really excellent. It's wonderful for people to have that kind of experience. But we also see the need for these quick and efficient kind of training experiences where people can get insight quickly, where they could make a plan quickly, and they can kind of do it, when they want to. And we were able to actually get these 2,000 people through that development program. So thank you very much.